Hello and welcome to the 25th Vermont Grazing and Livestock Conference. I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. I would like to thank the National Grazing Lands Coalition, Food Animal Concerns Trust, Morrison's Custom Feeds, Rural Vermont, and the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I would also like to thank our partners. I would like to thank the United States Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and the National Resources Conservation Service. I would also like to thank Cedar Tree Foundation and the Forrest C. and Francis H. Latner Foundation. Thank you for joining us for the 25th Grazing and Livestock Conference. The conference is brought to you by the University of Vermont Extension Center for Sustainable Agriculture and the Vermont Grass Farmers Association. Enjoy the content.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jen Colby from UVM Extension, who will be our moderator for our four-season Water Innovations panel. Our plan for this session is to start with introductions and background from each of our panelists, Matt Garcia, then Ben Nottermann, and then Bruce Hennessey, and then we'll open it up for some questions after that. So as we go along, I encourage you to use the question and answer tab and start to ask your questions as ideas come to you. So we're going to start with Matt, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Matt, and also talk about your system. Thanks.
Great. So thank you, Jen. Thank you for everybody attending. My name is Matt Garcia. I am a board member of the Vermont Grass Farmers Association, a relatively new one. I'm also a professor at Dartmouth College, and I mostly have done work on labor and immigration and farming. But when I moved to Dartmouth in 2017, Vermont called my bluff. I had never really been engaged in the actual farming part of the food system. And my grandparents had been farmers in a very small way, subsistence farmers in Southern California. And so I'm making my grandmother proud by raising sheep, cows, pigs occasionally, and goats at Taste for Good Farm in Thetford, Vermont. So one of the things that I encountered when we inherited the farm, when we bought the farm, so to speak, is that we had some water problems. I began to see problems with flow on my farm from my well. My home and my farm is on the same well. And so the first year I had sediment in my water. And then the next year, I actually ran out of water in the middle of the summer. So I consulted a well person, and he promised that if he hydrofracted it, that everything would come back to where I needed it to. And I only got about 1 to 1.25 gallons per minute more. So I continued to have problems, and I'd spent a lot of money at that point. And I decided, being from the Southwest, I just come from Arizona, where rainwater harvest is a common feature of solving water problems. I entertained that idea. And so now I just want to show you a video that kind of takes us on a field trip to my farm, and then we can talk about the solutions that I've engaged. So. Hi, welcome to my farm, Taste for Good Farm. And I'm talking about my water problems and how I solve them with rainwater harvest. So a couple of years ago when I started farming, and I have cows and sheep, I found during the summer that my well was getting sediment. My farm and my house is on the same well. And at one point, it got so bad that I actually ran out of water for a short period of time. So I brought a well expert in. He fracked it for a considerable amount of money. That only got me 1.25 more gallons. I'm running about 2.5 gallons
per minute on my well. It's just not enough. So the next step was to either drill a new well, which is exceedingly expensive and actually uncertain, or I'll do what I've done, which is move to rainwater harvest. I fortunately had a friend who had access to fiberglass containers. I'm showing you one. This is a 1200, and I'll show you a 6000 that I'm working with now. So it was a combination of these containers. I have a network of gutters and PVC that catches the water off of my roof, directs it into here, and then the water travels through 3/4 inch and 2-inch polyethylene lines that are connected to a whole irrigated system in my pastures through Plassen valves and couplers. So why did I do this? Well, rainwater is increasingly reliable even in the drought. If you look at the average rainfall for my area, it's 28.53 inches a year between April and October, which is the primary months where my cows are really drawing on the water supply. If you look at the amount of rain that I'm catching in that period of time versus the square footage on my roof. Average square footage for a house, I'm not catching this much, but I'm catching just enough to meet my demands. Average square footage for a house is 3,000 square feet. So if you take 28.5 inches and you calculate the amount of rainfall per square footage on 3,000 square feet, you get somewhere in the neighborhood of 54,000 gallons of water. Let me check my numbers. 53,322. That comes out to 1 inch of rain equals 1,869 gallons. So like I said, I only put in temporary, and this is winter so you don't see them, but temporary gutter lines that I can take off because of the winter. The snow comes down and can rip them off, so I put temporary ones up. Everything else pretty much stays intact. And it was through this system that I was able to essentially beat the drought this last summer, which was a national disaster, as you all know. The local school, which is less than a mile away, actually ran out of water and they had to charge the well with a water delivery. I got through. And so this was a kind of test of concept. I had 3 1,200-gallon tanks that I place here next to my garage and my workshop. I'll show you my barn in a second, and then there's a water tank on the hillside which allows me to gravity feed. So I'll be with you in a moment to show you my catch and my delivery system off the barn. Thanks. All right, so the system I just showed you was near my home and my workshop. This is down on the farm, and what we have is this very tall barn. This is one of 2 barns, and you can see if you look at the roof and down below the roof line, there's the same kind of attachment area where you can attach a gutter. I have PVC wrapping around the front of that barn, and then it comes around and wraps around the other side, and I have a gutter on that side, and it catches the water and directs it into a 6,000-gallon tank. Let's go look at that. All right, so this is the other side of the barn. This is where both sides come together. As you can see up here, there is a space for my gutters. And then they all come together right there in the PVC. And you can see that the outlet is lower than this 6,000-gallon tank because I had a 1,200 here. And I've replaced it since I proved concept this summer. I'm moving up to a bigger amount, 6,000 gallons. And I've actually put another 6,000 gallon up the top of the property that allows me to collect and feed, actually to feed water, gravity feed water to the pastures. I'll show you that in a second. So because the water gets so heavy once that container is full, I have foam board underneath. And also that's most important to keep the bungs from touching the ground and having pressure on them. those bungs right now are 1.5 inch lines. I had 2 inches on my 1,200 gallon tanks. When we get to spring, I'm going to connect that to a 2 inch polyethylene line that I bought at FW Web. And before it gets there, I actually run it into a gas-powered water pump that pushes the water up the hill. And if you look up there, you see my other 6,000 gallon tank. Next to it are the 1200s that I used last summer as well. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing your solutions and your opinions. Thank you.
So I know we pitched this as 4 seasons water solutions. I'm in process. Right now I have about 2.5 seasons covered with the system. If I were to go to doing this all year round, what I would probably do is get a horizontal tank as opposed to those vertical tanks, dig that one in up above the property, make sure it's filled at the end of fall, beginning of winter, and then live off that water through dug in gravity lines. But at the moment, I haven't invested in that. I'm still in a process of proving concept, as I said. And now I'm jumping up to the 6,000 gallon tanks. I think it's really important. The one thing I would say is if you can get recycled equipment. So the recycled fiberglass was better than the kind of plastic ones that you can buy at Tractor Supply or whatever. The weather and in particular the sunlight will deteriorate that plastic, where the fiberglass can last for a very long time. And as you saw with one of my containers, it had vinegar on the side, and that's because it was rescued from a cucumber farm / pickle factory in Western Massachusetts. So, and I have been seeing on Craigslist and what have you, other venues, resale of these containers. There might be questions about cost and those kind of things, but I can tell you that it was far less expensive than drilling a new well. And with climate change and with the volume of water that we get in Vermont, it's far more dependable as well. So that's my story. I can talk about the given components and all the other things that you would need if you want to do this, but I'm going to end my section now and pass it off to, I think it's Bruce. Is that right, Jennifer? Jen?
I think we're going to go with Ben next, but I do have a question from Bruce before we move on to Ben. So how would you, do you have a plan in place, or how would you deal with potential pathogen contamination from any of these used tanks and that might negatively impact animal health? What's your plan there?
Right. So last year, because I was on 1,200 gallon tanks, I used it up almost as quickly as I collected it. And so it wasn't as big a concern. I have these 6,000 gallon tanks. And so rainwater harvest companies, there are some in the South and in the Southwest, they recommend chlorine treatment. But if you don't like chlorine, then there's other additives that you can put in that prevents algae growing and contamination of the water. The other important thing is at the end of the season, if you're above ground, actually even if you're below ground, you have to be able to get into the containers and clean the bottom of sediment and whatever else might have grown. So that's one thing that I did as well. And so those are the kind of 2 things that I think I'll have to consider as I move forward in this larger capacity of my system.
Cool. Thank you so much, Matt. And I'm going to encourage folks to keep dropping questions into the Q&A for when we open it up, and we'll pass it on to Ben next if you're ready to go, Ben.
All right, good morning. I think it's still morning, barely. All right, so I think, Colleen, are you, or Jen, are you moving my slides? Is that what we figured out? I think, okay. So anyway, water at Snug Valley Farm. So if whoever's in control, if they could slide to the next one. So we run a whole bunch of different systems. We have 5 different systems under our management. Only one of the systems is pressurized, and that's at the home farm. I don't have a fancy video like Matt. Kudos to you, Matt. So we're at the home farm. We're roughly 7,000 feet of pressurized 1-inch line. Some of it is about a third of it's shallow buried, which was the first install. And then I've since gotten away from that and gone to running all on the surface. So like I said, it's it's a mix of 1-inch black plastic line that's both 100 PSI and 160 PSI. The 160 is buried. The water lines run across the surfaces, are right underneath the fence line, so we don't catch them with a brush hog or injure them and then have a major leak. And then I'm sure most people have found this, but the Plasson quick connects, as Matt mentioned in his presentation, are definitely the way to go if you need flow to water animals and not wait for the very weak, top of the water tub floats. So you get a full 3/4 inch of water flow, and that's true flow, and it's really easy on and off. And I'll show an example of that a little bit later here. We could slide to the next one, please. So then on the other 4 properties that we manage, I've gotten kind of creative in thinking outside the box. One of the properties has a 1,000-foot black plastic line, and we're siphoning from a pond to probably 5 or 6 Plassons across that 20-acre property, or 10 acres on that side of the road that we need water at. I was trying to think outside the box. I got really tired of trucking water, and that's really annoying for me to have to truck water. If we were grazing a herd of 70, so they were rolling through about 1,000 gallons of water a day. That's a lot of trips with a tote and a lot of time, a lot of man hour, a lot of machine time. So we got to thinking, looking at it, and said, hey, there's a pond at the top of the hill. Let's see if the landowner is okay if we siphon some out of there. And the landowner was fine. We set it up and it worked awesome. I'm definitely not going to go back to hauling water. The second one, we're siphoning from a spring. That's for a 45-acre piece that is owned by the landowners, and hand dug well was probably dug 100 years ago. There's probably a 600 to 800 gallon reservoir in that hand dug spot. We ran 3,800 feet of 1-inch black plastic line from that to Plassons all the way down the property. We calculated like the foot drop. It's a 250-foot drop from the spring to the bottom of the line, and it's an insane amount of pressure because it's was it 2 or 4 pounds of pressure for every 2 foot of drop or 1 foot of drop. I don't remember what the head pressure calculation is, but it is. When you plug into it, that tank fills very fast. And then I've gotten kind of creative on reservoirs. There's a lot of used sap tanks kicking around, galvanized sap tanks that can't be used in the maple sugar industry anymore. You can usually score them for free or for $100 or $200. So I have one property that we truck water. I'm planning on drilling a well at that property this coming year, because again, I'm over the water trucking. That feeds about 1,500 feet of black line with Plassons every 80 feet. So wherever the movable temporary fence falls, we can always reach an outlet for the water. Last one, which we put in this past summer, we got a piece of property fence. There's 25, 30 acres. There's no power, so we had to get creative. I found a company in California that specializes in solar well pumps. A lot of the larger ranches out west that have fixed water points and no power at these water points, they swear by these pumps. So I said, well, might as well give it a try. So that solar well pump feeds a 1,200 gallon reservoir, and which then gravities down the property at about 2,000 feet of line. So if you go to the next slide, please. There it is. So we're putting in the panels. That's my buddy Brent. He was working with me this summer. We dug a well at this property with a EQIP grant through NRCS. I think we put in 6 sections of tile, 5 sections of tile, and we had quite a hole, and we wrapped it and then filled it with 1-inch screen stone. So we calculated that there's between 5,000 and 6,000 gallons of water storage just in the ground. And then that solar well pump feeds that sap tank that you can see on the right. sitting up on top of some concrete blocks just to gain a little bit more elevation. The property's a little flat at the top, and then it really gets steeper at the bottom. And with those Plasson Quick Connects, we found no issues as far as water pressure, even very close to the reservoirs. So I wouldn't go back. My pump went down because of an electrical issue for 2 or 3 days. Had to haul water to this property. That got old very quickly. And I'm looking at more solar options as we go forward. Next slide, please. And then my innovations as far as how do we water our animals? Again, that's the Plasson Quick Connects every 80 feet. I've got 4 or 5 of these blue water tubs. They're 55-gallon tubs or barrels that I've cut off at about 35, 34 gallons with an Apex 3/4 inch float. So it's a true 3/4 inch flow into the tub or the drinking tub. They work on about 4 PSI, so you don't need a whole lot of water pressure. And with it being a small tub like this, you can only get 1 or 2 animals drinking at a time, but they can never, even at 4 PSI, cannot outdrink the float. So I've had very good luck with these. I was watering a group of 70 fat beef that were anywhere from 900 to 1,100 pounds this summer off of one of these. So as long as they don't run out, I didn't have any problems with it tipping. The only time I had problems with them tipping the tub over was if my reservoir went dry, and then they got a little frustrated. And then it took some time to catch back up. But as long as you can keep water in front of them, they shouldn't be in a deficit which they're all trying to drink at the same time. I was kind of over dumping 100 gallons or 150 gallons every day when we had to move beef forward, because we move once a day or twice a day. And it just became apparent it was a huge waste of water. So I'd rather dump 30 gallons or 35 than 150. And on that picture on the right, after 2 or 3 seasons of using these tubs and struggling to dump them every time and usually getting soaked or filling my boots, my buddy Brent came up with a very sweet dump handle, which you can see there. I don't know how I missed that for that many years, but it was a game changer. So on that, I don't know if I have what's next on the next slide. So here's some resources. I was thinking about how can we work to put in water systems at low cost. So if you go to the local lumber yard, you get 160 PSI pipe, you're going to be 55, 60 cents a foot. With my background in maple, there's CDL, Leader Evaporator, H2O Innovations, and LaPierre maple companies. They're maple supply houses. They have a lot of stuff that can translate to farming at a very reasonable price. The 100 PSI 1-inch pipe is 20 to 23 cents a foot at CDL, whereas if you buy that at the hardware store, it's going to be closer to that 50-cent mark. If you need 160, which is usually what NRCS needs, I found it at Goodrich Maple in Cabot for roughly 25, 26 cents a foot, well under half of what it would be at a hardware store. All the fittings, like all your barbed couplers, your tees, all that stuff, so much cheaper at any of these places than the hardware store. So that would be my recommendation. Don't buy it at your local hardware store. You can get it much cheaper at one of these places. And they're scattered all over the Northeast here. And again, the RPS solar well pump was definitely the way to go. And yeah, so I guess I don't really have anything specific, but I've got, I could probably answer whatever questions we have after Bruce goes.
I will ask one question, which came, of course, from one of your co-presenters again, because you guys are generating excellent questions. We haven't even opened it up to the audience yet. So what's the sap pump itself made of, and like how durable is that versus another kind of a pump? Is it specific?
The well pump, you mean?
The sap pump?
No, I'm using sap tanks, but it's a solar well pump.
It's a solar well pump. Okay.
Yeah.
So how durable is that?
It seems to be really well. It's a very heavy duty well pump. It can be submerged to the model I got to almost 300 feet, just under 300 feet, and be able to lift water out of that. It's only submerged or below grade by 16 feet for me, and I'm going up another 20. So it's a very powerful flow when that thing kicks on. So there's a low water sensor in the well, so it won't ever run dry. It'll shut itself off. And then you also can put a sensor in your reservoir tank so you don't overfill it and waste water, and that seemed to work really, really well. It took a lot of headache and a lot of stress and a lot of management off of my plate. So it wasn't like I had to go start a gas pump for 2 or 3 hours and be like, oh, did it overflow? Did it, all these things. It was like it came on when there's sun and it calls for water, it'll come on, or daylight. So I have the reservoir, so I don't have to necessarily have battery backup for the nighttime. I had batteries there. I never connected it. I never needed it. So it ran really well in that manner. And I never ran dry this summer. So knock on wood.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Ben. And I think we'll move to Bruce and get a sense of what's going on with his system. You ready, Bruce?
I am indeed. Welcome to all of you. I'm Bruce Hennessey of Maple Wind Farm in Huntington, Richmond, and Bolton, Vermont, soon to be just Richmond and Bolton. We're in process of selling our Huntington farm right now. I just want to mention before I get started, I am going to share my screen and control my screen. I hope that works out. It has in the past, so we'll see on that. I do want to mention that much of what Ben has done, we have also done on our property. We've used solar pumping stations. We have made shallow wells to take advantage of springs, both hand dug and using an excavator. And we run all of our surface water lines at 1 inch over the surface underneath fence line, just the way Ben does. So I'm not going to duplicate that. I'm going to focus actually a lot more on winter solutions. And I also have a few general principles that I hope our other panelists can add to as they. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully this all. Are you able to see that?
I'm able to see your Zoom screen. Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. I'm going to take that out of here. All right, 4-season water systems. I'm going to do just a quick introduction of the kind of farm that we have before we get started. This is our mission, which this is why we exist. So I like sharing this with everybody. And we also we have a daily morning meeting with our staff, and somebody recites this at every morning meeting to remind us of what we're doing. At Maple Wind Farm, every enterprise is connected. We have our tall grass grazers, our cleaners and fertilizers, our renovators and compost converters, and quite a lot of slaughter and processing. All right, moving on. This is going to be very quick. I just have a few slides. So for cattle and winter water, we've been through a whole bunch of iterations around winter water. What we found was that we had a tremendous amount of grazing that we could still do with stockpiled pasture, even after things were freezing enough that using our surface water lines just wasn't possible. And so we wanted to put in kind of centralized watering systems that we could kind of that we could fence our cows back to, so that we could get out there and still graze even into December. As a matter of fact, our last grazing day this year was December 31st, just before the new year. So it was kind of that was a lot of fun. And we did experience a drought, but we destocked in a way that would allow us to keep going that way. So that was our situation. We have used a lot of different winter water solutions for cattle. This is the one we settled on because it doesn't take outside power to operate in general. So this is a passive solar heated watering situation. It's been long enough. I'd have to look up I really don't have the company name, and they may not even exist anymore. I haven't heard a lot from them in a few years. But I can put that up on the chat or the Q&A in the community if I can find it. I could not find it this morning for whatever reason. Anyway, this is a super insulated box. It has a float valve inside. You actually you bring up water line from below frost line up through an insulated tube to take advantage of geothermal heat. So the tube is insulated, but it actually is captured air inside there, and the tube is about as wide as this hole right here. So it looks like this, just going down 5 feet into the ground, and the water pipe comes up and connects to the water through that system. And then it has a reservoir that goes around this actual watering tube, and then you have a float on top of that, an insulated float that keeps the water from freezing on top. So this system works extremely well when you have a good amount of cattle or other livestock that can reach in there. Horses come to mind as well, but that is its weakness. You really have to. It really works on the tenet that you're getting 50-degree water from your well or whatever water source that you have that is currently unfrozen and underground, that is replenishing the water that's fastly dropping to the freezing level. And so it's that replenishment that really keeps things working here, plus some solar gain from this panel out here. So unfortunately right now we only have six cows, so we augment the heat in here. We have a 250 watt a little heater. A lot of people would think of it as a bucket heater in here, just helping keep that water warm. It is thermostatically controlled, so it doesn't operate when we have warmer temperatures. So that's one solution that we've had for cattle. We have this in 4 different locations around our farm, and it allows us to effectively graze beyond the freezing time and have a winter solution all winter if we need to. One of the things that I found with this, we had a number of these that we placed outside in the open air, and we had a lot more problems with that, especially when we had big snowfalls and things like that. Snow would get in there and just clog up the works and make it very difficult. So we did find it necessary to put some kind of shelter over this that would protect the actual drinking part of the water while still allowing this panel to access the sun outside facing south, of course. And of course, you do have to make sure that your cattle are fenced off of that panel so that they're not stepping on it and cracking it and those kinds of things. And you do have to think about keeping that clear of snow and other things. I'll move over to pigs. We've made big time use of these Mirafount waterers. It's on the same principle as the cattle solution. It does have a tube that goes down, that's a foot in diameter. It's insulated. It goes down 5 feet into the ground below frost level. You bring up a pipe through there, and it comes up and water and into an insulated float, and then pigs can access that from the outside. Cattle could also access this same thing. So this is low enough that pigs can use it and cattle can also use it. We did have a hard time training cattle to use this system, and so we did end up with cattle tying the flaps open to get them started, and then some of them could figure it out, and others couldn't. So we did end up tying those open and then using a small 250 watt heater to keep things open at times. That's why we kind of prefer that solar heater, that solar water for cattle, because we really don't have to heat it as long as we have enough animals in the herd to replenish that water often. One of the big things about this is, and about all water is trying to keep it clean. So on a daily basis, we are taking out the plugs from the water reservoirs, and here's, excuse me, I'll go back. Here is, sorry about my fingers there. This is just a standard plug that we can undo and pull out and empty the water out over here. And that's really essential because pigs especially will put a lot of grain and other stuff. We have all sorts of forage in there that they're eating and just pack it full. And if you don't empty it every day, what that does is it backs up and affects the float and the valve, which ends up causing your water to start to kind of weep and not shut off well every time. So that's very important. It's very important to do those daily cleanings and to keep things clean for their health as well. And then the final piece is our poultry. We've had huge struggles with winter poultry for layers in particular, and we finally settled on this. So our evolution has been from putting kind of water founts on heated bases, and we'd have a lot of problems with electricity popping out on those, popping our GFCI outlets, and then having frozen water in the morning, that kind of thing, to pipe systems where we were constantly running pipe using a pump from a heated reservoir to run it through pipe with water nipples on a pipe and insulating that pipe. But of course, if you lose electricity in any way, shape, or form, that causes that system to fail, and the pipes will crack and all that fun stuff, which is never fun to come and discover first thing in the morning when you have a couple thousand layers that are extremely thirsty. So we also, because of frustrations with those kinds of systems failing, we went to an open tub system for a number of years, which was not in the least great, but it was something that we knew we could guarantee would work for the birds. We would have to clean them twice a day. We did add apple cider vinegar in because the birds would very easily drop their own manure in there. So there was a lot of contamination issues. We finally settled on this, and this is a brand new system for us. We got these horizontal nipples that we put at kind of bird head height in these Rubbermaid tubs. And then we fill these tubs with a frost-free hydrant that's in the house. We do have heaters, 250-watt heaters in these tubs that are thermostatically controlled. And we do have tops on to keep the water clean. This is the cleanest we've ever had our winter water for birds. It's worked really well, but because this is insulated and it gets filled on a daily basis, we feel, and because it's very warm in the winter housing of the layers, it's in a greenhouse situation. So when the sun shines, the temperature is easily 20 degrees higher in there than it is in the outside. We feel like we're not using a lot of energy to keep this water ice free. So this has worked out extremely well for us. And we thought we were going to have problems with birds figuring out how to use these because we don't use these in the field. We actually use Poisson bell waterers out in our mobile field shelters, which is obviously not a nipple system. But these birds were literally immediately figured this out and were getting after it within just a few minutes of putting these waters in place. So I'll move on to this kind of final slide that I have here. I think the best thing for anyone to do is to make sure you keep it simple. The less you have that can break down on you, the better. I think that's the best thing about our poultry system, is that there's very little that can break down there. And even if we lose electricity overnight, we feel like with the insulation that and the warmth of their shelter, that we can that will stay open unless it's extremely cold. You got to make sure you can empty and keep everything clean for the health of your animals. Any new structure that you build on your farm, you really need to build in some frost-free water capacity. And so in farm planning, you want to do that. So that doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of money. It just means that you need to have a few places where your water is under the frost line and comes up to a frost-free water hydrant. And those are easy to find. You really need to have a backup plan. What is your backup plan in case your primary system fails? And so for us, even though we don't do this anymore, we have the same open waters that we can use for cattle. If our solar water breaks down, we have these frost-free hydrants nearby for pigs and for chickens during the winter, so that we can just fill tanks and get water to our animals, even if our primary system breaks down. But you'll notice that neither one of our really none of our systems depends on kind of an integrated electric system to keep things warm. And then I think overall on your farm, you need to have a power-free, frost-free, reliable backup. And what I mean by that is kind of a lot of what Ben has done and Matt has done, which is that you have some type of well that's set up on a gravity system, where if you lose power for 5 or 6 or 7 days, you have something that can come down and operate under pressure, even if you have no power and it's freezing out. And for us, that meant building out a shallow well uphill on our farm, and making sure that we had buried line down to a usable location on our farm where we could turn on a frost-free hydrant, and even pressurize our house if we had to, but certainly get pressure to our animals and fill water for them. And that's been an extremely helpful thing, especially on our hilltop farm in Huntington, where we've lost power for 5, 6, 7 days at a time during certain weather events. And oops, seems like I've frozen here. I will stop sharing and come back.
So Bruce, I know that you said you wanted to just talk about winter water, but we've got some questions in the Q&A around summer poultry water. So I know you may not have pictures queued up for that, but could you just describe your system for folks?
Okay, if you just take Ben's system, exactly what he did with his surface water lines, and you put it around your fields just the same way he did underneath fence lines or permanent paddock fence lines, so that you don't run over them. And you put in a Plasson quick connect. We do ours a little less often. He's every 80 feet. We're more like every 200 feet because we figure we can run a 100-foot hose to wherever we need it to be in any part of the field. And then to our mobile field shelters, we use 3/4 inch line, hook into those quick connects, and then we have quick connects on our houses and daisy chain them together to run into 3/4 inch PVC that then drops into our Plasson bell waterers. So that's how we handle our poultry operations out in the field. And again, cattle and pigs, cattle is running exactly like Ben. Like I want to be Ben when it comes to water systems for cattle, and that's exactly we're doing exactly that. For pigs, we have a float water system for pigs where they're not turning whatever water they have into a big wallow. And we have that in a system where we can pick it up easily with tractor forks and move it from one place to another. But it's going off that same system. And I will just mention that if you are grazing any kind of livestock, that your fence and your water system are the two systems that you've got to have dialed in to be effective. So if you're going to spend money on your farm, that's where you need to spend it. I did see a question about how do you do winter water without a bearing line below the frost line without using electricity, and I just don't know if it exists. I think what you're talking about is taking your water from a frost-free situation by hand, by buckets, and moving it, or maybe in a small tank on a four-wheeler or something like that, which we have done in the past, and when we've had systems fail. But if you really want to spend less time watering your stock and more time figuring out how to improve your business, you're going to want to have a better systems, and I would encourage you to invest in those systems that allow you to really spend high value time elsewhere.
Well, thank you for addressing that and the question as well. So I'd love to open it up to all three of you for an open question. I think you've partially answered this, Bruce, so maybe it makes sense for Ben and Matt to weigh in, but what's worth spending money on in your watering system, and what does not need to be the top of the line or the most expensive? Like, where would you invest your money if you're going to invest your money in your water system? I'll pick on Ben.
Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, anywhere I would move water to more places than you think you're ever going to need it on your farm, to give yourself the flexibility so you don't pen yourself into, I can only graze here because I don't have water in this other pasture. When you're laying water line and you're spending money on water line, try to buy twice as much as you think you need, because you're going to need it, and then you won't regret it. And like I said, going to those maple supply houses can save you a lot of money. Just put in more than you think you're going to need, because you will eventually. It's like you build a shed and then you fill it up and you're like, I should have built a bigger shed. Same principle for water. So spend the money, do it once rather than trying to scab it all together to make it work.
For me, I'll chime in on that and say you can. I think you can find the same prices that Ben's talking about at a large plumbing supply place like FW Webb.
So Webb, I actually found in terms of the price, it wasn't so good, but they had supply that I couldn't find anywhere else. If I wanted the 2-inch polyethylene line, they were the only one that had it, actually. So that was really important. I will say the thing that I'm not sure that I would spend on again is the replaceable gutters. And that's because I'm not sure that it's worth the effort season in, season out, especially if I go towards what Ben and Bruce have. If it's a 4-season, I really would like to have a system that's durable enough to handle the snow coming down off the roof. And I've talked to various people that think that that's possible, but it's quite a task to get up and take it on and then put it back on. I think the plastic couplers and valves is really the most useful thing that I invested in this last year, and I'll buy some more. And then the other thing I would say is Ben's addressed this with the maple containers. I think I'm addressing it with my fiberglass containers. and that is that you got to go for a durable container. There is a temptation to go with plastic. If you're above ground, those plastic containers will deteriorate quickly, mostly due to sunlight. And then on the issue of contamination, the fiberglass is actually tinted, so it reduces the amount of algae growth and that thing that's happening. It doesn't completely eliminate it, but it's much better than those clear white ones, plastic ones that you're finding at Tractor Supply or other venues. Oh, and my wish list is Ben's solar pump. I'm gonna go get that because I most worry about that gas fired pump. I did it all this year because I was testing concept. I had one given to me, but that's my next investment as a solar pump. And I did entertain the idea of a ram pump, but I don't know if that's an energyless pump that's via gravity, but I don't know if since neither of you are using that, it seems like it would not be the way to go, but that's kind of my way of slipping in a question by answering a question.
How did you know that was actually my next question, Matt? So I was going to be like, so what are the pros and cons of different kinds of pumps, you guys? Thanks, Matt.
I'll throw this out there real quick. The RPS solar pumps are covered under NRCS grants. You just got to convince your agent to check into it, and they will, and then you'll find that it's there. So that's always an option as well. One quick thing on the 4-season water that I didn't touch on. I don't have an instance where I can use this, but if you have a stream that flows year round above wherever you're going to water, you could build a water box and a pipe system to feed a water tub that flows in the same amount it flows out. That moving water is way less likely to freeze, if ever. So if you have a single water point that you can flow water to and return it back to the stream, whatever is not consumed, that would be an easy, cheap, free way to do it as well.
Can I quickly say something about just NRCS, just real quickly? When I was, and I'm very much behind these guys here, but when I inquired about getting funding to support my system from NRCS, I was told that there wasn't very much support for rainwater harvest in the Northeast because we don't need it. We're not a dry climate like Phoenix, where I came from. So I found that discouraging, but I fought through it. So I'm glad that they fund something, Ben.
I'll respond to that by saying that I actually received a drought mitigation contract from the NRCS to put in a well and pumping system to help us with that, because we could show that we had major impact from wells, and it's amazing. I can't imagine at least with that special project that they wouldn't support that somehow, Matt. But the other thing is, I'm just going to make a plug. We looked at putting in a tank up on our property for a gravity feed system to do solar. That was in conjunction with solar pump from a beaver pond going up into this tank and then gravity feeding down into our system. And we ended up from a cost effectiveness over time, like over a 7 or 8 year period, going with a shallow well system where we could drop in 3 well tiles, put some stone around it, and then have a little frost-free, underground line out to a frost-free hydrant that then fed the gravity feed all the way down through our pastures. And I think that from our perspective, yes, it was definitely more money than buying a tank and putting it on a platform up there. But it gave us 2 things. One, it gave us winter capacity way up on this hillside through a frost-free hydrant. And so we could continue to graze even if it was freezing out. And I think over time, we haven't had to worry very much at all about any kind of algae buildup or any contamination. And we've also found that was a much bigger tank, much bigger water holding capacity, right around 2,000 gallons in this kind of hole we made in the ground and filled with with screened 1-inch stone and 3 well tile that really has been a great reservoir for us. So it's just an idea, look at those cost benefit analyses before. I think we all tend, and certainly I'm one of these folks that tends to go for the cheapest option, but that isn't always the cheapest option over time.
Thank you so much, you guys. And we have just a few minutes left, just a couple minutes left. And we've had several folks adding in their experiences either through the Q&A or through the chat. And I just wanted to pass it real quickly to our colleague Amber Reed, who's got some pictures to share of her system for winter water. Amber, you out there?
Hi. I just want to make sure that I can screen share here. So
you should be able to.
It's really great to see everyone's water systems. There's so much cool innovation out there. Okay, so let me see if this will work. So let's see. Sorry about that. Okay, can you see anything?
Yes.
Okay, so let's see. Can you see the water that I'm showing right now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so this is a water that I built a couple of years ago in my barn, and we literally hand dug a spot through the hole, through the floor, and then put in a piece of culvert, and we pipe the water up through it, and we have a drain that goes down. And how this works is I actually open that handle up a little bit, and a tiny bit of water comes out, and then it goes down that drain right there. And I can actually pull that green part out if I need to for some reason, but that keeps a bunch of hay from going and plugging my drain that's underground that I would have to dig up if it got plugged. This actually works great. My chickens actually drink out of it, and my sheep. There is a version of this that a neighbor of mine, who I got this idea a little bit from, and then I sort of tweaked it for my own place, that he uses for his cows, which basically just protects the water, the incoming water pipe and the outgoing drain, because cows hammer on everything. So sheep are a lot more delicate, so you don't have to worry as much. However, I do remove the handle, otherwise the sheep turn the water up. Which is super annoying. And then I wanted to just share this pig water that I built. This is my foot in front of the pig water. And the way this works is this is for summer. So this is not for winter. But since we were showing a few summer options, I just wanted to show this. Basically, I used a piece of sonotube, poured some concrete, had it set up with brass. And these are pig nipples that come off and the pigs bite it. Let me see if I can show another picture of this. But the thing I like about this water system is it's not super heavy. I'm not like a 200-pound dude, so I can't lift a tire full of concrete, but I can lift these things no problem without, breaking my back basically. And what I would do is I would set these up so that there's a PVC actually that goes in the back. I don't know if you can look at the back here, and that protects where the hose goes in. And I would set this right next to the fence so that the hose was underneath the hot wire so the pigs couldn't mess around with it. And they did flip them over occasionally, but if it was close to the hot wire, they did not screw with it very much. This was really great because it keeps the water clean. They don't waste it and they can't wreck it. They could wreck it. I mean, a very, very few times over the years that I have a pig like tear the thing out and the hose off and chew it. But considering how much damage pigs do to water, it was like hardly ever. So anyways, I don't know if anyone has any questions really quickly before I sign out here.
Thank you so much, Amber. Yeah.
So just a real quick clarification. The water that's coming into the first picture you saw is cycling back down to just like continuously loop. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah, exactly. So it only works if you have adequate winter water. And the cool thing about this system is, I think another of the presenters, Ben, maybe mentioned it. You can set this kind of water up temporarily, like in your field with a pipe coming out of a spring or a stream that goes into a water tank, and then you have an outflow. The thing that I see a lot of people do that is a mistake is, because since I visit a lot of farms, is I see people just turn on their water tank a little bit and let it run over, and then they end up with a mud hole in their pasture or a skating rink, which animals can fall on the ice and break their legs and stuff. So just make sure that you have an outflow that's adequate, that doesn't get knocked over, so that the excess water can leave your pasture without making a mess.
That's a really good point. Greg Judy has a bunch of good videos on that. He exits his water close to 100 feet away from his water point in a fenced out area.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I just want to just comment that we've done a lot of work with pig nipples, similar system to yours, but we have had pigs who turned that area into a wallow where that is, which is why we went to a different system. But that is a really effective system, and they love that. I have one picture of our summer watering system for poultry that I could share if we have time. If we don't, no big deal. Yes, no?
1 minute.
A moment over time, but go for it.
Okay. I'll just share it really quickly. Okay, so you can see here, these are our Plasson waterers. There's 3/4 pipe here, and we are sourcing the water for this system from the 1-inch black pipe that we have over the surface at our fence lines. And we bring that over with a 3/4 inch polyethylene pipe. And then we daisy chain all of our shelters together that are out in the field. So it's just one connection point from the main water source, and then it runs through all the houses and drops down to these Plasson waterers. And I just stopped sharing, so thank you.
So I would love to just say thank you so much for sharing all 3 and 4 of you, for sharing all these experiences, pictures. Let's please continue. There's some great photos dropped into the Q&A section, giant tire waterers out in the field. Let's just keep these great ideas going, because we're all going to figure out what is working in our systems. So thank you all so much. Our final session for today will be at 1 o'clock with Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, and we hope you all join us there.